The earth we leave is beautiful and rich. It gave us all we needed for all the generations we have lived. How will you leave it when it is your turn? What can you do? Jean M. Auel. Welcome to this week's episode of Warfare, Advancement, and Revisionism. My name is Preston Floyd, and as always, I'm your host. I'd like to thank you all for joining me this week. I hope my returning listeners have been keeping well and you enjoyed the last episode, and any new viewers or listeners, welcome. Please enjoy as well. So this episode is going to be another one of our bonus episodes. And it might be a little bit of a stretch to include it as one of the fantasy historical stories, but I have some reasons for that. First, I got a couple of suggestions for books to cover, but I wasn't able to finish them in time to do episodes on them. So those will be pushed forward to future bonus blocks, or a future Halloween type situation. But I would like to go ahead and thank those that gave some suggestions, specifically one, Edric from Twitter/X, for their suggestions. They gave me a couple of books that will turn out into episodes in the future. Or at least one of them will. I'm really enjoying it. I just haven't had a chance to finish the book yet. So, and this is not by choice, but I have been extremely busy these last couple of weeks, and I've not had much time to read outside of research and reviewing things that I've read already for the other October episodes, sadly. So, I have, however, had enough time to watch a film or two, and of those films is Auel, The Last Hunter, which is going to be the topic that we discuss for this week. Now, this is a French language film from 2010. The French title is Auel le Dernier Neanderthal, which, if you can probably guess, translates to Auel, the Last Neanderthal. Now, I don't know why they changed the title from the French movie. It is based on the first novel of a trilogy of books by author Mark Klapczynski, or Klapczynski. I'm not sure which. My pronunciation of Slavic names is not the best. But the French, the novel is called Auel l'Homme Ancient, or Auel the Ancient Man. And again, I don't know why they changed the title of the movie from that of the book. I am assuming it was due to either them telling a different enough story that they didn't want people to expect a super faithful adaptation, or it's because they didn't want people to be confused that Auel was a Neanderthal instead of a Homo sapien. I can't really say for sure, as most info about the production of the movie and all of the info on the author and the book is in French. Sadly, I don't know much about that language and couldn't get as much information on those subjects as well. I couldn't get as much information on those subjects as I would have liked. As the book was written in 2004 and has not been translated into English, I'm not sure it ever will be. So, make of that what you will. Still, the movie has been translated, though it is very hard to find. You'll have to dig around online to get a version of the movie with subs. However, the entire movie can be found for free on YouTube, but most of the versions I saw there, in fact, all the versions I saw on YouTube, had no subtitles. That said, I feel like this can be watched without understanding French. Obviously, if these were real Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon Homo sapiens, you couldn't understand them either. It makes it seem a lot like Quest for Fire if you don't have an understanding of the language being spoken. Wouldn't matter if it's French or any other language you can't speak. Now, obviously, even though Quest for Fire doesn't have any understandable dialogue, it is still a fantastic film. Though this movie, I will say, I don't think is as good as Quest for Fire. But it is still a decent enough film, though. For a movie in the 2010s, it feels like it had a lot more money behind it than Quest for Fire did in the 80s. Adjusting for inflation, all that. Although I do think they did make kind of an effort to kind of invoke some aspects of Quest for Fire, things like shot composition, lighting, etc. Also, Al has some much more visceral depictions of violence. Not to say that Quest, couldn't be violent and didn't depict violence, but Al not only depicts the violence, I guess it depicts more violence, but also its world is also depicted much more brutally and probably closer to the reality of the world during this period. It's not, I think they say specifically how long ago it is. It's not set quite as far back as Quest for Fire, I believe. It's set around 30-ish thousand years ago. At least that's kind of, I would say 30 to 40,000 years ago is the period that this kind of takes place in. And I believe Quest for Fire is meant to take place, it was, I believe, 80-ish thousand years ago. So, double, this kind of is the halfway point between, the modern period and, Al kind of takes place like halfway between the modern period and when Quest of Fire is supposed to take place. Now, of course, Quest for Fire is based on a much older novel. I think it was 1910, 1911, 1912, somewhere in that range that that novel was based, or that the movie was based on, was written by Rosny, I believe, was the original author. And he, of course, was working off of much older archaeological evidence and much less sophisticated archaeological evidence, as well as other fields. So, of course, things depicted in that are, not very accurate in a lot of ways, although I think there are spiritually some ways that the movie is, it captures a lot of spirit that I think could be accurate, but the actual, science of it and the quote unquote accuracy of it leaves a lot to be desired in terms of what the humans actually would have been like. Now, of course, Al is much more recent, has a lot more archaeological and various other types of evidence to go on, so it is more accurate. But that being said, 2004 is still, there's been a lot of breakthroughs since then. In fact, one of the big discoveries that were made after the 2010 release of the movie, of course, is the discovery that, yes, modern-day Homo sapiens, at least those of European descent and some other places nearby, have DNA ancestry and Neanderthal genes floating around, which prior to 2013 was not confirmed by any DNA evidence or anything like that. Now, of course, there had been theories, but a lot of people considered the Neanderthal to be a much more primitive version of man. This, of course, as we have talked about in this show, is very much is very much probably not the case. I think there's a lot of, modern evidence and more recent discoveries that disprove that, and I think I've kind of talked about those things, pretty well, at least in our earlier episodes. I think I mentioned some of the big discoveries, but if I didn't, then yeah, Neanderthals are much closer to us than we might be willing to believe, at least on certain things. They probably, again, had some physical differences, but not enough to be, wholly abhorrent or, unattractive in human eyes. They were just, they had slightly different proportions. They were shorter probably, but stouter and stronger. But our ability to create more advanced technology and our probably higher numbers really helped us in the end kind of supplant them. But we'll go into that here shortly. This movie does depict a number of different interactions Neanderthals would have had with the early Homo sapiens in Europe. And most of them, as you probably guess, are very violent. And while we can't say that with 100% certainty, it is something that we know to have happened and probably was, the norm, or at least more common than peaceful coexistence between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Excuse me, I lost my place in my notes here. We'll get back to it. Now, the protagonist, as you probably guessed, is named Al. He is a Neanderthal hunter. He and his tribe lived somewhere in the Eurasian steppe. I'm guessing it is supposed to be near or in Siberia. And this is a very small group. I think there were no more than 10 or so that I could easily make out in the opening scenes. That said, most or none of the Neanderthals in the tribe have any type of characterization or importance really to the story, with the exception of Al, his young daughter Nea, and his best friend / hunting partner Boer. Now, there are a number of really good things that I think this movie does. They have a really good job. Like, the prosthetics look decent enough, like, to make the actors look like they are actually Neanderthals. I think the main actor, Simon Paul Sutton, who was actually an English actor, or a British actor, I should say, he looks very good. I think his makeup for the most part looks good. It is a little disconcerting though, because you have all these actors that are wearing, their Neanderthal makeup, but then you have the young infant girl playing Nea, and she has no makeup whatsoever. She looks just like a normal human baby. So I don't know if they made it seem like I guess maybe the Neanderthals grew their noses once they got older, or they had brow ridges. I mean, obviously they can't put a baby in full face makeup, but it is very jarring. It's like that is that is very weird juxtaposition there. And Al and Boer are very they're very successful hunters. The opening scene is them bringing back a kill to their clan's cave. But this is another one of those things that I think the timing of it kind of plays into some of this. The Neanderthal cave is a very dark and dank and very dreary looking location. The people in it, they're a very happy group. They seem to get along well. They have a lot of they do seem like they're a very tight-knit community. Their guard at the mouth of the cave that they live in, that welcomes Boer and Al back, he is depicted as having one arm. So he is kind of like, he's not as useful for a hunt, but he's a good watch. If he essentially kind of puts himself as first line of defense, and he'll make sure that the rest of the tribe has time to defend themselves. And we've talked about the Shanidar Cave, I think in the Clan of the Cave Bear episode, where they found the very aged Neanderthal with a missing arm and physical deformities. This shows even if he wasn't 100% healthy, they did go out of their way to provide and support him, which shows that the Neanderthals are far from like these primitive like brutal, violent people. They do care for themselves and their group, and they do treat themselves, or they do treat each other with respect, even if they're not prime of their life, excellent provider type member of society or of a clan. So I think that is a good depiction. I like that they did that. It does show that they are, that they're not necessarily, quick to reject people from their group. But I do feel like their cave and their lifestyle, they have almost no art aside from like very rudimentary and janky jewels and ornamentation of bone and shell, that kind of thing. There's not a whole lot of art or anything else that kind of makes them, much different from just your stereotypical caveman in furs and leather, banging rocks together to make fire. But maybe that was a choice because, again, that this is a very small group. This could be meant to show that how bad the Neanderthals have it at this point in time. Obviously, with the date range, there are very few Neanderthals left, if any. In fact, 30,000 years ago, they might have all been dead by that point. And if they weren't, they're very small numbers, and they may have already been kind of integrated and subsumed into any neighboring Homo sapien groups if they weren't outright killed. But, that's obviously just a guess on my part. But, yeah, the depiction of Neanderthal cave life I don't think is super accurate. Now, it may be, again, environmental. That is also a choice because, again, they are in Siberia. But that's, again, me just guessing. I couldn't really find too much information on production notes. They are quickly, their return hunt and Al celebrating the birth of his daughter is quickly interrupted because their lookout is ambushed by a polar bear, and Al and Boar quickly go on a journey to hunt the animal down. And they are successful, but Boar does lose his life in the process. Al is very broken up about this. Again, he shows a very deep emotion. Very good, very well acted. Which is it's hard to emote, I'm sure, with those with the prosthetics they have on him. But he does a really great job of that. Sutton, he really does a fantastic job of getting his emotions through those layers of makeup. However, on returning from his hunt with Boar, Al finds his clan destroyed. He's lost everything in that attack, including his infant daughter, Nea. Now, I would say spoilers, but this all happens within like the first 10 minutes of the movie. It's a very jarring depiction, and again, the violence in this is pretty heavy in a lot of ways. In some cases, they do kind of pull back from being super focused on it, but it is still visceral, and there's a lot of it, and it's in some cases very casual violence in terms of how it's dealt out by everyone. But Al losing his entire clan to an attack, first to an animal and then to a group of Homo sapiens within like the first 10 to 15 minutes is of course the driving factor of this movie. And Al is alone. He is Again, at least according to the movie, the last Neanderthal. So he tries. Obviously, he's broken up. He's very upset, and he thinks for a while, and then he thinks back to his younger days living far to the south in what is the, I believe it's the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, Portugal, that area. He remembers his brother and him growing up as young boys, and Al decides to return to his original homeland. His brother is Oa, which is just Al reversed, O-A, which I thought was pretty funny. But while he's trying to decide what to do, he's thinking about it. It's pretty easily, you're trying to get it into his mind, even if you don't understand French. You can see that he is, trying to figure out what to do with himself, and he thinks back to when he was a boy and how he came to live with this tribe as opposed to the tribe he was born into. And I like this kind of depiction because, again, while we don't know how these types of things happen, I do think that it is a good idea of why this sort of thing would happen. Al and Oa are young hunters. They are practicing. They find, while out one day kind of like looking and hunting, they find like a man who had died, and he had just been kind of looking out at the sea, and his flesh had begun to decay, and he's got all these bird feathers on him. Birds have been using him as roost, but they find this bone flute that had been wrapped around his neck. Al takes it, and he figures out how to use it, and Al and Oa return to their tribe, and then they find their father, who is very sick, dying, and Al plays the flute, and it kind of gives his father comfort in his final moments. You then get a quick jump forward in time, and another group of Neanderthals show up. They bring some gifts to the leader of the tribe, and then they exchange some young people. And Al is exchanged while Oa is kind of left behind. This is obviously, they're bringing these young people into the tribe, but not necessarily to marry outright, but obviously that is the end goal, that they're bringing these young people in so they can get accustomed to this new group, and then eventually they'll probably find a mate from within that tribe. And of course, Al is very distraught about this, but as he is leaving, his brother kind of gives him the flute, make sure he has it, and as he, turns and walks away over the cliff, he turns back to his cave, the cave he had grown up in with his brother and father and mother, and he sees his brother pounding kind of like a stump drum, and that's kind of like the big driver for Al in a lot of this movie, this memory of his brother playing this drum, kind of urging him on, drawing him back to where he is originally from. And also that's where you're introduced to Boar. You see that Boar's a few years older than Al, but still fairly young, and that he's kind of like the first person in that group that Al is given to, that he's kind of like, hey, I'm Boar, are you okay? And Al, he kind of quickly becomes like a secondary brother to Al. I think it's pretty clear that he is kind of tries to take the place for Oa, for Al, to make it things easier. But again, that's stuff you just have to read into it. It's not clearly stated, but I think that's kind of how it works. Now, I don't want to give too much away because this is a good movie. It's not long. I think it's about an hour and a half, if that. It's probably a little bit less, actually. But I do want to talk about some of the big themes. But before I do that, actually, there's a lot of animals in this movie, like live animals, not CGI. I think there are like some like CGI hornets or wasps or something like that, but like a lot of the other animals you see in this are very real. The polar bear is real. The shots of it are real, though obviously I think there are some very obvious green screens where they didn't want any humans nearby. But yeah, there's a lot of really well put together like animal handling scenes, so that's nice. Again, practical effects are something you really don't get too often in today's movie industry. For a number of reasons, but I do think it's there are certain animal scenes where like yes, you want a real animal there. Yeah, I think that's the main thing in terms of like animal stuff. I just thought that was one of those practical effects I thought really worked out really well for the movie. As Al makes his way, he does, of course, come across a number of other groups, almost all Homo sapiens, though he does meet one older Neanderthal man kind of hanging around a group of Homo sapiens. He's an outcast. And that's one of the things that you get very, it's a very heavy theme. There's like outsider, insider aspect of this early European lifestyle, like this early like Cro-Magnon, ancient Homo sapiens in Europe type lifestyle. But the Homo sapiens are not just, of course, fighting Neanderthals and fighting the wilds and the elements to survive. They're fighting each other. There are, I think, 3 or 4 different Homo sapien groups depicted. And I do like the way that they're all depicted a little bit differently. They obviously share certain levels of technology, spears, knives, a flint and stone weaponry. But their cultural artifacts all kind of distinguish them. There's a group that kind of paints themselves in white and kind of brownish red, dark ochre. They paint different patterns on themselves. You have a group of humans who practice scarification, like implants to kind of make their skin, give their skin a lot of detail pattern. And that's really well done. And they, of course, have their own type of jewelry and things like that. Now, Al, for the most part, he's a bit of a loner. Even when he's meeting these other people, he's put in a lot of danger from one of these Homo sapien tribes. But he does meet some people who are not immediately just downright, hey, I'm going to kill you. One of these is the human woman. Her name is Aki. She's played by Aruna Shields, who is actually a fairly... I think she's been in a few other things, but she actually has like a really... kind of a really detailed like filmography. I think she's in a bunch of Indian movies as well. So she's been in a few things. She actually had a number of spots on like BBC shows as well. And she does a great job. I think she's by far the best actor in this, by far. And that it may be that she's able to act better without all the prosthetics on. I think she's able to emote much more clearly. But her relationship with Al is obviously very important to the movie. There's a lot of you get a lot of the difficulties that would come with these types of people's meeting. Lack of a language, common language, obviously being the primary thing. But the languages aren't so complex that they can't easily teach the words for things to each other. So they're able to communicate early on with these very very simple 1 to 2 word explanations of things. And of course, this does evolve that they're able to communicate much more normally as time progresses. Another big factor that I like they show how the humans or the Homo sapiens were more advanced than the Neanderthals. Aki teaches Al how to use a spear thrower to kind of increase his range. She also shows him cave paintings, the very detailed kind of paintings of things like rhinos and that sort of thing. And I one thing I really love is that she shows how the process would have been done with like filling negative space, like placing the hand, spraying the paint or aspirating it out of the mouth, like over the hand to kind of create the symbols that these early humans would have done. And Al is very mystified by this to an extent. He believes that the rhino, in fact, that he one of the rhinoceroses or woolly rhinoceroses he sees on the cave is real at first. And Aki kind of has to convince him, no, it's just a depiction. Now, again, I think Neanderthals probably had a fairly decent concept of art, but again, I think this movie is working from a little bit earlier understanding of what Neanderthals actually were. That said, I do think there are some elements where the author or the writers or directors of the movie also kind of got ahead of themselves in depicting some Homo sapien behavior. One of the tribes of Homo sapiens you run across in the movie, they're practicing ritualistic human sacrifice. Now, I haven't talked about it too much yet in the show because it's something that we don't really have too much information on just yet. But they are sacrificing, or trying to sacrifice humans, at least in certain places, and in certain cases successfully. They're trying to kill humans as some type of, in some type of ritualistic fashion. Now, there are, again, there's no evidence for this sort of thing happening this early. I am sure that there definitely was a religious component to, having like a big communal meal, or at least, if not a religious one, then some type of mystical or, spiritual, for lack of a better term, reason for, these types of preparation and consumption of flesh. And we know that, humans did eat other humans. Again, we talked about how some of the earlier sites in Western Europe for Cro-Magnons there were evidence of human bones being eaten. Now, or being gnawed on at least by other humans. Now, was this done actively? Was this done as kind of a way to, destroy your enemies or absorb their power? Or was this something that was only done with like a close family member who had died, that you consumed parts of their flesh so that they'd stay with you, that sort of thing? There are other cultures in other parts of the world that have practiced cannibalism. It's something that I think everywhere, at least everywhere on all the continents at some point or another, has had some type of cannibalism practiced. So, I don't think that is a big stretch to imagine that would be happening at this point in time. But the almost religious or mystical nature of the sacrifice, I think, might be a little bit ahead. But again, that could just be my guess, because again, we don't have evidence for these sorts of things. We know that there was probably, or we guess, I guess, would be the best way to play it. We assume that there is some type of mystical component and things like that to those cave paintings depicting animals. But we know that these were also, at least in some places, these were depictions, and they were also used to transmit knowledge about these animals, not just a spiritual or religious form, but they did have a practical purpose as well. Though the practical purposes may have been secondary, or they may have started as the primary, and then the the other aspects of them became more important. It's hard to say for sure. But the idea of sacrifice, of giving something up or offering something up to a force that is not, that is not apparent, we don't know that that is something that would have happened at this early period. There's no depiction of a god or a deity or anything like that, or an animal even, that the humans that are practicing sacrifice, I didn't see it, unless I missed it, but I didn't see any depictions of any kind of god or goddess or anything like that. They didn't have like a big Venus of Willendorf like figure in the background that they're sacrificing these people to. Whereas later that's definitely certain that something would appear. And remember, we talked about how these cave paintings of like animals and things like that this might have been a type of sympathetic magic, to like, you go into this cave, it's a part of the spirit world. You're trying to draw these spirits of these animals into the real world. They're trying to take them out with you. In this depiction, it's like we are killing these humans, presumably to eat them and other stuff. But there's not really saying, okay, we're killing this human to draw others to us or that kind of thing. So I don't know what the ritual significance of this would be, like, other than to say, hey, we're going to kill you to eat you. But they don't necessarily have to do this big kind of performance about it. We don't know that there's any reason that would have been a thing. But again, I'm not as familiar with cannibalistic traditions around the world. It's something that some people now say is overplayed and it wasn't as widespread, and some people say it was only ever done in very specific circumstances. It's hard to know for sure, at least for me, and it's not a subject that I've really dived into. But maybe this is something that was done on occasion. Like, yeah, we captured you. We're just gonna do a ritual and, cut you open and eat you. But why that ritual exists, for what purpose, this movie doesn't really kind of give any idea on. So maybe it is something that was done. Maybe they just, hey, I beat this guy in a fight. I'm gonna perform this weird ritual for no reason, and then just eat him. I would have liked to have a better understanding of why this was done. And I know that's hard to show in kind of in a movie format like this. And again, it's not the longest movie in the world. Maybe it's explained better in the book if that scene exists. And it does make me kind of want to read up on the subject. But this type of just empty ritual, I don't know. Well, maybe I shouldn't refer to it as an empty ritual. But this type of like very, very formulaic ritual where they're saying this prayer, I don't know that something like that would have existed. I think if they did have any type of ritual to sacrifice a person for consumption or whatever, I think it would be done for a very specific reason, and would have probably been something that was much more kind of, because in this movie it seems like it's haphazard. It seems like they're just doing it kind of, every so often. Like it doesn't seem formal enough. It doesn't seem like it has been kind of thought out. It seems like they're kind of doing this sort of thing on the fly. At least that's kind of what I got for it. And it's kind of a small thing to nitpick. It's not a huge scene in the movie, but it's one of those things where I think like they're giving a little too much maybe to Homo sapien development at this point of time, when they're not maybe giving enough to the Neanderthal. Which again, it's a small thing because there are some, it's generally a better depiction of Neanderthals than what you see in, say, Quest for Fire. But there you go. All in all, though, again, the movie is pretty good. It's decent. I'd give it a solid C+. If you've got an hour and a half to kill and you want to see a dude fight a bunch of, Paleolithic animals and humans, give it a go. It's pretty good. There was one thing about the animals I did forget to mention. I'm glad I thought about it. So, there are a lot of real animals in this. Again, I think almost all the animals, with the exception of the insects, are real. But they do depict some animals that would not exist in Europe. There is a bald eagle. There is also a steppe bison, like an American bison. I think they were trying to say, okay, yeah, this is or it's supposed to be like a Eurasian bison of some type, but it's an American buffalo is what it is. But again, as that other animal is extinct, I can understand why they did it. But yeah, they depict some North American animals in the in Europe. So that was one thing that I missed. So yeah. But again, movie's decent. Give it a watch if you got the time, or if you're just stuck somewhere and you only have access to YouTube. Just Google it and just watch it like it's Quest for Fire. There is kind of a fake language in it, but I couldn't find any information on what it's supposed to be. But yeah. I wanted to do another bonus episode before the month was out, and try to have it up on Tuesday. However, that's not going to happen. I did not get as much work done as I wanted to. Friday night or Saturday, I was not feeling great Friday night or Saturday until like the early afternoon, so I wasn't able to get any work done. So this will be the last bonus episode for this season. We'll be back next season to continue to talk about developments in North America at the 8,000 to 6,000 BC, and we'll probably have an episode pretty much for the rest of this year. I'm not sure how much longer we'll be doing this season, but we might even start season 4 before the year is out. So we'll just have to see. I'm not quite sure how many episodes I have left, but I'd say at least 3, if not 4. I'm glad everyone seemed to enjoy the last episode. It was a big episode. I've got a lot of downloads for it. I think over on YouTube it had over 120, and for this month, even before I put up that double episode, we're already over 300 downloads just for audio alone this month. So this is by far my biggest download. We might be able to break 3,000 downloads before the year is out. Definitely, I think before the second anniversary is gone. I think that's easily going to be done. And again, that's just audio, including YouTube stuff. We've obviously already smashed that, but I'm really, really happy with all the growth that the show's seen. So I want to thank everyone for that. Now, if you have any questions or feedback or anything, really, just reach out to waratRevPod@gmail.com. You can reach me via direct message on Twitter, or you can just @ me there. You can also comment on any of my YouTube videos. I will, of course, respond if it's something that's an actual question, or anything like that. Otherwise, I will give a thumbs up or a like or all that kind of stuff just to show you that I read it. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining me this week. I hope you'll continue to listen and enjoy, and I will see you all next week. I hope you have a good rest of your day and week as well. Thank you all. Talk to you later. Goodbye.